Imagine waking up tomorrow, and everything is free, not discounted, not subsidized, free, no more bills, no price tags, no rent, no loans, no debt. You walk into a store, take what you need and walk out. Robots refill the shelves. No one stops you. No one needs to. Every home is powered. Every stomach is full. Not because of magic, but because of a world so efficient, so abundant, and so automated. It simply doesn't need money anymore. But in a society where everything is free, what drives us? What happens to ambition, to power, to purpose? And most of all, who are we when survival is no longer the goal? To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to the death of scarcity and the birth of something radical. Once upon a time, everything had a cost. You worked to survive. You earned to eat. Entire civilizations were built around the idea of value, how to make it, protect it, exchange it. But what happens when machines can produce more than we ever could, faster than we ever dreamed, with resources that never run out? This isn't fantasy, it's the logical endgame of exponential progress. In this hypothetical world, the perfect storm has arrived. Fusion, energy, and renewable tech provide endless power. Self-replicating automation builds anything on demand. AI logistics ensure perfect distribution and zero waste. And raw materials from mined asteroids to 3D printed organics make scarcity obsolete. The result? A civilization where ownership has no meaning. Labor becomes unnecessary. And the economy as we knew it collapses, but not in chaos, in liberation. Instead of panic, a new society emerges, one where human worth is no longer tied to productivity. Without the grind of survival, people begin to ask new questions. What do I want to do with my life? What does it mean to contribute when no one needs anything from me? This isn't just a future without poverty. It's a future without pressure, without financial fear, and without the invisible chains that kept billions locked in place. So, what fills the vacuum left behind when capitalism dies? Let's step into the aftermath and explore the architecture of a post-economy world. At first, no one believed it was possible. Capitalism was a fortress, but it wasn't war or protest that tore it down. It was efficiency, quiet, relentless, and eventually, absolute. It began with automation replacing repetitive labor. Factory jobs vanished. Then truck drivers. Then accountants, lawyers, architects. As artificial intelligence advanced, even creative industries, film, music, design saw machines outperforming humans in both speed and originality. But automation alone didn't end the system. It was what came next. Fusion power eliminated energy costs. Autonomous agriculture ended food scarcity. Smart logistics made distribution seamless. And robotic manufacturing meant physical goods could be produced endlessly, tailored to demand in real time. Suddenly, things weren't just cheaper, they were free. Not because someone paid the bill, but because there was no bill. When you can 3D print a house from local materials using solar-powered bots, what's left to charge for? Banks collapsed. Wages lost all meaning. Corporations, unable to compete with decentralized production networks, either dissolved or transitioned into open-source collectives. Even property rights faded. After all, what's the point of owning land when anyone can terraform unused space into livable, sustainable environments overnight? At first, there was chaos. Governments scrambled to stabilize economies with universal basic income and nationalized infrastructure. But soon, it became clear money itself was obsolete. Not by ideology, by obsolescence. Capitalism didn't fail because people rejected it. It failed because it no longer served any functional purpose. A new framework emerged. Instead of economies of exchange, society shifted to economies of access. Instead of hoarding wealth, individuals now had universal entry to platforms that fulfilled their needs, whether it was food, shelter, education, or technology. Everything ran on abundance. Everything ran itself. No one owned anything, but no one lacked anything either. Work, optional, housing, on-demand, education, personalized and limitless. Healthcare, fully automated and proactive. And with no need to hustle for survival, people stopped asking, how do I make a living? They started asking, what do I want to live for? And that's where the real transformation began, not in our systems, but in ourselves. Because once humanity was freed from the chains of labor, it had to rediscover its purpose. When the dust of the economic collapse settled, people stood face to face with a question that had haunted philosophers for centuries. What is life for, when survival is guaranteed? For the first time in history, every human had full access to shelter, food, safety, and information. There were no poor, no billionaires, no one scrambling to pay rent, no one left behind. But this was more than a social shift. It was a psychological upheaval. Generations had been conditioned to equate identity with occupation. You are what you do, but when there's no need to do anything, who are you? At first, some panicked. People wandered through weeks of aimless freedom, unsure what to do without deadlines, paychecks, or routines. There were spikes in depression, anxiety, not because life was hard, but because it suddenly lacked structure. It turns out, purpose was the rare resource automation couldn't manufacture. But over time, something miraculous happened. People began to explore, not just the world but themselves. Artists who'd once given up on their craft returned with a vengeance. Musicians with no pressure to go viral found their authentic sound. Tinkerers, inventors, researchers freed from funding proposals and market pressures unleashed waves of innovation never seen before. Science surged forward, not because of deadlines, but because of genuine curiosity. Communities reformed around shared interests rather than shared struggles. Neighborhoods became creative hubs, wellness sanctuaries, research labs, immersive theaters. People offered their skills freely, not for income, but for impact. The word employment faded. Instead, there were callings, projects, collaborations. Some built floating gardens across the oceans. Some spent years restoring dying ecosystems. Others developed new languages, new philosophies, even new forms of art that blended emotion, VR, and AI. And perhaps most striking of all, education never ended. Children didn't just attend school, they co-designed it. Adults didn't just get degrees, they learned continuously, switching disciplines as often as they changed interests. In a world with no finish line, knowledge was no longer a tool for survival. It was a playground. Of course, not everyone became a genius or an artist. Some people lounged, some gamed, some wandered. But that was the point. Choice had become sacred, and for once, every human had time to truly ask themselves, what makes me feel alive? With scarcity gone, the world shifted from a race to a renaissance. But even in this newfound freedom, society still needed structure, rules, coordination, guidance. So how do you govern a civilization where everything is free and everyone is free? When wealth vanished and need disappeared, governments faced a strange and unprecedented challenge. How do you govern when there's nothing left to tax, trade, or control? At first, it seemed like leadership itself would dissolve, with no economy to manage, no armies to fund, and no corporations to regulate. Traditional political structures began to look obsolete. Elections, parliaments, bureaucracies, all relics of an age that revolved around scarcity. But it quickly became clear. Freedom without coordination could collapse into chaos. And while basic needs were met automatically, humans still had complex desires, expression, safety, growth. Society needed structure, just not the old kind. So governance evolved. The new systems weren't built on authority, but on participation. Imagine real-time, decentralized decision-making, powered by blockchain-style consensus platforms, transparent AI oversight, and direct citizen input. People didn't just vote every 4 years. They shaped policies daily, through community councils and digital referendums. And because no one was financially dependent on government programs, the power dynamic shifted. Leaders became facilitators, not rulers. Their job, to coordinate collaboration, protect freedoms, and ensure equitable access to the global abundance grid. Even the idea of countries began to blur. Borders had lost all economic purpose. What emerged instead were interest-based communities, floating cities for environmentalists, mountain hubs for philosophers, virtual nations for artists and explorers. Citizenship became fluid, chosen by value alignment rather than geography or birthright. Education was completely transformed. No longer bound by national standards or tuition costs, learning became a lifelong journey. People could instantly shift from quantum physics to culinary arts to starship engineering, all taught by AI mentors or immersive real-world labs. Healthcare, fully automated, moved from reactive to proactive. Biometric monitoring, genetic editing, and nanobot repair systems meant most illnesses were prevented before they started. Instead of hospitals, people had wellness dome centers that focused on balance, longevity, and emotional health. Justice systems changed dramatically. With no poverty, theft became rare. With universal mental care, violent crime plummeted. When issues did arise, they were handled through restorative circles, mental reprogramming, and consensual rehabilitation. Prisons, as we knew them, disappeared. Power didn't vanish, but it no longer came from wealth or weapons. It came from influence, from the ability to inspire, organize, or create meaning in others' lives. The influencers of this age weren't rich celebrities. They were thought architects, idea cultivators, empathy leaders. And even though resources were infinite, one thing remained finite: attention. In this post-scarcity society, what you could capture in hearts, in minds, in ideas was the new currency of relevance. But with survival guaranteed and systems stabilized, a deeper challenge began to surface. If everything is free, why try at all? Let's dive into the strange psychology of unlimited abundance. For millennia, humanity's drive had been fueled by necessity. You worked to eat. You fought to survive. You learned to compete. But in a world without struggle where everything is free, instant, and abundant, what happens to the human spirit? At first, people celebrated. No more rat race. No more living paycheck to paycheck. Stress melted. Families reconnected. Passions flourished. But then came the emptiness. A subtle, creeping void that automation couldn't fill. Some called it the abundance paralysis, a condition where too much choice led to no action at all. Why do anything when nothing is required? Some became addicted to stimulation, immersing themselves in endless VR experiences, AI-generated fantasies, or pleasure loops that offered dopamine without meaning. Others spiraled into depression, questioning their place in a world that didn't need them anymore. The traditional milestones, careers, promotions, achievements had evaporated, and with them, a sense of progress. But human psychology, resilient as ever, began to adapt. New motivations emerged, not driven by fear, but by curiosity, connection, and legacy. People started setting personal quests. Some climbed impossible mountains just to prove it could be done. Others devoted decades to decoding ancient languages, restoring lost cultures, or building machines that sang with the wind. The thrill was no longer in profit but in pushing the boundaries of experience. The most admired individuals weren't rich or powerful, they were remarkable, known for their originality, impact, or insight. They weren't climbing ladders, they were planting forests. And in that shift, purpose returned. Communities helped each other stay grounded. Rituals were reimagined daily, gratitude circles, mentorship quests, communal storytelling events that connected people across physical and digital worlds. Spirituality, long suppressed by materialism, experienced a renaissance, not centered on doctrine but on presence, awe, and unity. Still, dangers remained. Apathy was a silent predator. Not everyone found their rhythm. And in the shadows of paradise, there were whispers of disconnection, people who felt like passengers on a train with no destination, which is why meaning became the new survival. As society began to invest in something rarer than gold or depth of experience, depth of relationships, depth of self, the question was no longer how do I make a living, but how do I make life feel worth living? But not everyone embraced this new world equally. Across regions, cultures, and history, some clung to the past, while others rushed toward the future, which raises the question, can a free world truly stay united? On the surface, the world had never been more unified. No nations starving, no resource wars, no global debt, with automation handling logistics and abundance, ensuring everyone had enough. The map began to blur. Countries, once divided by conflict, now collaborated through open data, shared technology, and decentralized councils. But harmony is never absolute, because while scarcity had disappeared, identity had not, and deep within the human psyche, the desire to belong, to differentiate, still pulse. Old cultures clashed with new ideals. In some places, elders resisted the erosion of traditional hierarchies. In others, religious groups rejected the dissolving of work-based morality. We were made to toil, they claimed. This is not progress, it's heresy. Entire enclaves opted out of the abundance grid. Some formed neo-agrarian settlements, shunning technology and automation entirely. Others embraced a kind of digital nationalism, erecting cultural firewalls to preserve identity in the face of overwhelming homogenization. The global language of access designed to erase inequality sparked new divisions. Those fluent in the emerging post-need culture gained soft power. Those clinging to older ways found themselves isolated, not by force, but by advancement. And while war, as we knew it, was gone, ideological friction remained. Hacktivist groups emerged not to steal wealth, but to disrupt influence. Reputation manipulation became the new sabotage. Digital enclaves launched mimetic campaigns, reshaping narratives, swaying collective goals, rewriting the direction of history not with weapons, but with ideas. There were even whispers of an underground resistance groups who believed that humanity had lost its edge. That struggle was essential. That abundance had made us weak. They staged symbolic rebellions, destroying automation hubs, reintroducing scarcity zones, choosing lack as a philosophical stance. The world had become peaceful, yes, but not passive. And freedom, as always, had a price: disagreement. Still, the global community adapted instead of suppressing difference. It created metacicities frameworks where diverse ideologies could coexist without interference. Think of it like overlapping realities. A floating anarchist city beside a conservative biosphere. Both connected, both autonomous, both respected. Global governance became less about law and more about protocols, interoperability, rather than unity. As long as you didn't harm or restrict others, your way of life was valid. And perhaps, in that messiness, true harmony was found, not by uniformity, but through distinct individuality. A chorus of worldviews, sometimes discordant, often beautiful. With Earth stabilized, however, imperfectly, humanity's gaze turned upward and inward. Because when all material needs are met, the final frontier isn't survival, but it's creation. With no bills to pay, no hunger to quell, and no wars to fight, humanity didn't just pause, it exploded. But not in violence, but in vision. Because once the Earth had nothing left to conquer, we looked up, and out, and in. This was the new Renaissance. A Renaissance not fueled by kings or corporations, but by curiosity. Unrestrained, untimed, unlimited, humanity began to colonize frontiers once reserved for science fiction. Space was no longer a dream of billionaires. It was a birthright of the collective. With AI-designed ships and fusion-powered propulsion, orbital cities formed around Earth and Mars. Terraforming crews made up of volunteers and hobbyists began planting life across barren moons. Not out of necessity, but wonder. The oceans, long ignored, became luminous cities beneath the waves. Self-sustaining domes, bioluminescent gardens, aquatic research temples where humans swam alongside Ayanan's dolphins, decoding the ancient language of the sea. Meanwhile, another revolution happened inward. The mind itself became a canvas. With biotech and neural interfaces, people expanded their consciousness at will. Memory enhancement, emotional sculpting, shared dreams. You could download new languages in minutes, experience another person's entire life in an afternoon, or enter full sensory simulations, indistinguishable from reality. The arts reached new dimensions. Painters designed gravity-defying sculptures made from sound. Musicians composed symphonies that responded to your emotional state in real time. Philosophers hosted debates inside quantum spaces where every possible outcome unfolded simultaneously. But perhaps the most profound shift wasn't what humanity did. It was what it became. With no jobs, no money, and no masters, people started evolving, not biologically, but spiritually. Not in the religious sense, but in awareness. We stopped thinking in terms of productivity. We started thinking in terms of legacy, impact, connection, expansion. Children were no longer raised to succeed. They were guided to explore, to collaborate, to grow. A child born into this world might never know what a deadline is, or a paycheck, or even the concept of wasted time. Because in this civilization, time isn't measured by clocks, it's measured by depth. Did you go deeper today? Did you feel more fully? Did you connect more meaningfully? Did you create something that didn't exist yesterday? In this world, humanity didn't become perfect, but it became awake. And in that awakening, it discovered something ancient and new all at once, that the truest wealth is not what you own, but what you imagine, what you experience, and what you give. So now we ask the final question. If everything is free, what is truly valuable? Let's bring it all together. In a world where survival is solved, where ownership is meaningless, and where every desire can be fulfilled at the push of a button, what's left? What becomes rare in a land of infinite abundance? Meaning, presence, time. When nothing costs money, the only true currency is attention. The only real wealth is experience. And the only thing you can't automate is your humanity. We used to measure life in hours worked, in salaries earned, in things collected. Now, it's measured in stories told, connections made, wonders explored. This world isn't perfect. There are still challenges, still disagreements, still darkness lurking at the edge of light. But they're no longer fueled by desperation or greed. They're part of the dance of discovery. You're not here to survive anymore. You're here to create, to grow, to imagine. So ask yourself this: if you were born into that world, what would you spend your life becoming? Because maybe that's the secret. Maybe the future isn't about eliminating struggle. It's about choosing the kind of struggles that make you feel alive. What would you do in a world where everything is free? What passions would you chase? What kind of world would you help build? Let us know in the comments, and if this made you see the future differently, share it. Because imagination spreads fastest when it's free.